The shooting range sat just outside the city, tucked behind a line of old warehouses and open land. It was the kind of place people came to feel important, to test themselves, or to be seen. On most weekends, the parking lot filled early with polished trucks and shiny cars. Men and women stepped out wearing branded gear, carrying new cases, talking loudly about scores and past wins. That morning was no different. The air smelled of oil, metal, and dust. Inside, the sound of shots echoed in a steady rhythm, sharp and controlled. A digital board near the entrance displayed records from recent competitions. One score stood higher than the rest, highlighted in bold. People stopped to look at it, shaking their heads with admiration. Near the back of the lot, a tired-looking sedan pulled in and parked far from the entrance. A man stepped out slowly. He wasn't old, but he carried himself like someone who had lived a heavy life. His shoulders were straight, but not stiff. His movements were calm, careful, almost quiet. He opened the back door and helped a small child climb out. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She held his hand tightly and looked around with wide eyes. Everything about the place felt big to her. The noise, the people, the seriousness on their faces. "Is this where you used to practice?" she asked. He nodded. A long time ago. He reached into the trunk and pulled out a plain, faded case. The corners were worn, the zipper old. It didn't look like much compared to the hard cases others carried, covered in stickers and brand names. He locked the car and walked toward the entrance, the girl staying close to his side. Inside, the front desk was busy. 2 staff members talked with a group of regulars, laughing and pointing at the scoreboard. The man waited quietly, holding the case in one hand and his daughter's hand in the other. No one looked at him at first dot when he finally stepped forward. One of the staff glanced up, eyes moving quickly over his clothes. Plain jacket, old boots, no logos, no confidence show. "Lane rentals are full," the staff member said without much interest. "I just need 1 round," the man replied calmly. "1 turn?" The staff member sighed, as if the request was a bother. "You'll have to wait." "That's fine," the man said. He stepped aside and leaned against the wall. The girl sat on a bench next to him, swinging her legs. Around them, conversations continued. People talked about groupings, wind control, upgrades. Someone mentioned the champion who was expected to arrive soon. A few others nodded eagerly. The man said nothing. He watched the lanes through the glass, eyes steady, focused, but relaxed. Not hungry, not nervous, just present. A group nearby noticed him after a while. One man leaned over to another and whispered something, glancing at the old case. They chuckled quietly. "Probably here for the experience," one of them said. "Kid's first time." Another shrugged. "At least he's starting her young." The girl heard them and looked up at her father. "Are they laughing at us?" she asked softly. He shook his head gently. "They don't know us. That's all." She frowned. "Does that matter?" He smiled, just a little. "Not today." Time passed slowly. Shooters came and went. Scores were logged. Applause broke out once when someone hit a personal best. The board flashed again, still showing the top record untouched. The man checked his watch. He hadn't planned to stay long. He had work later, groceries to buy, laundry waiting at home. This wasn't about him. It never was. He was here because his daughter had asked questions the night before. She had found an old photo while looking through a box at home. It showed him younger, standing in a dusty place, wearing gear that didn't match the man she knew now. His face in the picture was serious, eyes sharp. "Was that really you?" she had asked. "Yes," he had answered. "Were you brave?" He had paused before replying. "I tried to do my job." She had thought about that, then said, "Can you show me?" So here they were. After nearly an hour, a lane finally opened. The staff member called out a number. Before the man could move, another shooter stepped forward, confident and loud. "I'll take it." The shooter said dot. The staff member nodded and processed him without question. The man didn't argue. He sat back down. The girl's shoulders dropped. "I thought it was our turn." "It's okay," he said quietly. "Waiting is part of it." She studied his face. "You're not mad?" "No." That answer surprised her. More waiting. More noise. More looks that slid past him like he wasn't there. A few people noticed the child and smiled politely, but no one spoke to them. Finally, the staff member waved again. One lane open. "Short session?" The man stood immediately. "That's us," he said, voice steady. The staff member hesitated, then nodded. "One round only." "That's all I need," the man replied dot. As they walked toward the lane, a couple of shooters glanced over. One raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Another whispered something that made his friend grin. The girl squeezed her father's hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you sure?" He knelt down so they were eye level. "I'm sure. You just watch, okay?" She nodded dot. Inside the lane, the noise faded into a dull echo. The man set the case down carefully and opened it. Inside was a well-kept piece of equipment, old but clean, treated with respect. His movements were slow and exact, like he had done this many times before. He checked everything once. Then again. The girl watched closely, her earlier doubts replaced with curiosity. There was something different about him now. Not louder. Not bigger. Just more focused dot behind the glass. A few people began to notice. Not because of anything flashy, but because of how still he was. How controlled. The man took his position, but didn't rush. He breathed in, then out. His face showed no stress, no need to impress. Just calm. Before lifting the equipment, he glanced back at his daughter. She stood straight, hands folded, eyes locked on him. "This part," he said softly, "is about patience." She nodded seriously. Outside, the champion everyone talked about had just arrived, drawing attention away. People turned, excited. Conversations shifted. No one noticed the quiet man taking his stance. The room buzzed again, louder than before. Laughter, handshakes, cameras coming out, and still. The man waited. He wasn't thinking about the record on the wall. He wasn't thinking about the people watching or not watching. His mind was clear, grounded in habit, shaped by years he never spoke about. This was not a moment of pride for him. It was a simple promise kept. When everything finally lined up, when his breathing slowed and the world narrowed to a single point, he raised his position and prepared for his first shot. No one expected anything, and that was how he preferred it. The moment stretched like time itself had slowed down. The man stood in the lane, his daughter's small hands clenched at her sides as she watched him carefully. Around them, the range had grown louder, filled with the excited chatter of people who had just noticed the champion had arrived. Cameras clicked. Shooters adjusted their positions. But in the lane, all of that seemed distant. The man's focus was narrow, unshaken, like a calm lake reflecting only the sky above. From the back, a few people leaned closer to watch. The air was thick with curiosity, mixed with quiet skepticism. Whispers floated across the room. Some wondered who this quiet man was. Others made jokes under their breath, laughing softly at the idea that someone so ordinary-looking could compete with seasoned shooters. His plain clothes, the worn case, and calm demeanor didn't match the image of someone who could do anything remarkable. The girl tugged slightly on his sleeve. "Daddy, why aren't they looking at us?" He leaned down. keeping his voice low. Some people only see what they expect. Don't worry about that. Just watch me. Her eyes followed his every move. He lifted the piece of equipment, checking it carefully, with hands that were steady and experienced. Each motion was precise, practiced, and calm. He adjusted the sights once, then again. He didn't hurry. He didn't frown. He didn't speak to anyone else. He only focused on what mattered. Meanwhile, the champion had taken his place on the opposite side of the range, confidently setting up, greeting the small crowd that had formed. People were snapping photos and videos, murmuring about how impressive his record was, how difficult it was to even get a perfect score. The champion glanced over briefly and noticed the quiet man in the lane, the child next to him, but he barely gave it a thought. Surely, this man wasn't here to compete. More whispers spread around the room. "Who's that guy?" one person asked. "Does he even know how to hold it properly?" Another whispered, smirking. The man heard none of it. He had learned long ago that the opinions of strangers could not change what he had learned in years of discipline. Every step, every breath, every position had been ingrained in him. He didn't need to prove anything to them. He only needed to keep calm and do his part. He crouched slightly, checking his stance. The child mirrored him instinctively, crouching on the bench, trying to see better. He smiled faintly, but it was just the hint of a smile, not one that sought attention. His eyes scanned the target, lined up, and then he paused. The room seemed to fade around him. He was aware of the distant chatter, the shuffling of people, the tapping of a camera shutter, but none of it mattered. He breathed in slowly, feeling the rhythm of his heart. Not fast, not tense, just steady. The girl watched, completely absorbed, as if seeing him like this was a revelation. Back among the spectators, some of the seasoned shooters began to talk among themselves. "Do you think he's military?" one said quietly, nodding toward him. "Maybe. Look at how he handles." "That?" another whispered. But no one dared say it out loud, because it was still a silent assumption. They didn't know him, and no one had dared approach. The man adjusted his position slightly. A small bead of sweat appeared on his forehead, not from nerves, but from focus. He was ready. He was patient. He knew that rushing would ruin everything. Years of training had taught him that every movement had a purpose. He checked his stance one last time, breathing evenly. The girl leaned closer. "Daddy, are you nervous?" He shook his head. "Not at all. Just ready." She watched him, fascinated. It was the first time she had ever seen him this calm and controlled, like a side of her father she had never known existed. Her curiosity and excitement grew. She clutched the edge of the bench and leaned forward to see better. Around the range, the champion shot, hitting the target with expert precision. Applause rang out. The crowd cheered for the display of skill. The quiet man observed, but he didn't let it distract him. He understood the pressure and the attention it brought. He had faced situations far more intense, far more dangerous, and this was simple in comparison. A few people in the back started to pay closer attention to him. "Look at his posture," someone said softly. "That's disciplined. That's professional." Another nodded, leaning against the wall. Could be military. Could be retired. But they still whispered, still cautious, still unsure. None of them approached him. The man finally positioned himself fully. The equipment was balanced. He inhaled, counting silently in his mind. The girl mimicked him quietly, holding her small breath in anticipation. Around them, the range seemed to hold its breath too. Conversation slowed, a few eyes turned. Something about the quiet man, the calm he exuded, demanded attention without him trying to get it. The staff member glanced over, slightly annoyed. "This guy's taking his time." A seasoned shooter smirked. Probably a beginner. He'll mess up and waste a round. The man ignored them. Experience had taught him that judgment often came too early before the truth revealed itself. He wasn't here to fight assumptions. He was here for one simple purpose: to keep a promise to his daughter, to show her the way he once trained, the way he had learned to control himself and his mind. He took one last deep breath, feeling the calm settle into every muscle, every fiber of his being. His daughter's small eyes were wide and fixed on him. He smiled faintly, just enough for her to see, and then exhaled, letting all tension leave him. It was a gesture she understood immediately, a signal that something important was about to happen. "Ready?" He whispered Dot. She nodded fiercely. "Ready?" The crowd around them, still unaware of what was about to happen, focused on the champion again. They applauded another perfect shot. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Everyone assumed the records on the board would remain unchallenged for months, if not years. The man lifted his position. He adjusted the sights one more time, ever so slightly. The girl leaned forward on her tiptoes. A few curious onlookers watched in silence, sensing something different in the way he moved. But they didn't speak. He waited for the perfect moment, feeling the rhythm of his breathing, the pulse of his heartbeat. Then, without rush, he prepared for the first shot. The room was quiet around him. A few spectators whispered, trying not to break the focus he carried. The champion glanced over again, curious but not expecting anything. The man's calmness seemed almost unnatural in this space, surrounded by people eager to impress and compete. "Remember," he whispered softly to his daughter, "it's just the first step. Watch closely and you'll see." She nodded, gripping the edge of the bench with all her strength. She didn't blink Dot, and then the first shot rang out. It cut through the air, sharp and clean. The sound was different than the others. Not louder, not flashier. Just precise. Perfect. The girl's eyes widened. Some people in the back turned in surprise. The champion's head snapped toward the lane, noticing the shot, but unable to understand immediately what had happened. The digital board flickered, paused, and then the numbers updated. The quiet man's first shot had done something no one expected. But at this moment, he didn't react. He lowered his position slowly, steady as ever, letting the results speak for themselves. His focus remained on teaching his daughter the value of patience, discipline, and quiet determination. The room buzzed with whispers, confusion, and awe. The quiet man remained composed, his daughter beside him, both watching, as the world around them began to notice something they had not expected to see. This was not about glory. This was about showing what quiet determination and experience could achieve, even when the world ignored it. He turned slightly, giving his daughter a tiny, reassuring smile, and she understood exactly what he had done. She clutched his hand, proud in a way words couldn't capture. Around them, the spectators began to murmur. The champion stared, and slowly, the reality of what had just happened started to sink in. The first shot had changed everything in the room. There was a pause, almost as if time itself had stopped for a moment. People who had been whispering, laughing, or chatting froze, eyes darting to the lane where the quiet man and his daughter stood. Some whispered in disbelief, their voices low, hesitant. The champion himself turned fully, expression hard to read, staring at the digital board and then at the man who had just shot with incredible precision. The man lowered his equipment slowly, his movements smooth, practiced, and calm. He didn't celebrate, didn't smile broadly, didn't raise his hands. His focus was steady, grounded, unshaken. The girl beside him leaned forward slightly, awe written all over her face. She had seen many impressive things in her life, but nothing like this. Her father had taught her patience, dedication, and quiet strength in small, everyday ways, but now she saw it in action. In a moment that felt larger than life, some of the nearby shooters couldn't believe what they had just seen. Did he just? One whispered, eyes wide. Another shook his head. No way. That has to be a fluke. But no one could deny the numbers on the board. The shot had surpassed the champion's standing record. It was clean, flawless, and undeniable. The air shifted. Conversation stopped. People stepped back, unsure how to react. The range staff looked between each other, eyebrows raised. Stunned. The champion walked slowly toward the lane, his expression hard to read. His pride and reputation had been built over years, and here was someone plain and quiet, someone he hadn't noticed until that one shot, suddenly standing in the spotlight. The champion stopped a few feet away, watching the man carefully, perhaps trying to read him, perhaps trying to understand. The man remained calm. He checked his equipment once, ensuring it was still balanced, still ready. He didn't look at the champion, didn't react to the whispers. His daughter's eyes were fixed on him, and that was all that mattered. Is that your first shot? The champion asked, voice low, a mix of surprise and curiosity. The man nodded. First shot of the day. The champion blinked, silent for a moment. Around them, spectators began murmuring again, slowly realizing that this wasn't a fluke. People whispered about how impressive it was, how calm he looked, how precise his stance and handling were. Some even began to guess, quietly, that he might have a background in the military. The girl whispered, "Daddy, they're all looking at you now." He looked down at her, gentle, reassuring. "Doesn't matter. You saw it. That's what counts." The champion studied him for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slightly, not in defeat, but in recognition. "You've got skill. That much is clear," he said. The man inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. He didn't seek approval. He didn't seek recognition. He had never sought that in his life. His skill had been honed for other reasons, in places far more serious, far more demanding than this shooting range. Around them, the room buzzed with tension and excitement. Some people moved closer, curious to see him shoot again. Others whispered about whether this could really be the start of something new. The staff members, previously indifferent, now watched with growing interest. The man adjusted his stance again. He breathed slowly, evenly. Every muscle, every joint, every movement was deliberate. The girl mirrored him quietly, her small body tense with anticipation. She had seen him handle difficult things before, but nothing like this. It was like seeing a part of him that had always been hidden, a part that demanded respect without demanding attention. Another shooter, someone who had been practicing nearby, leaned over and whispered to his friend, "Did you see that? One shot, first try, beat the record." The friend shook his head, disbelief clear on his face. "That's impossible. Maybe he's military. Maybe he's trained in secret." The man didn't react. He wasn't concerned with guesses or speculation. He only adjusted his grip, checked his position, and focused on the lane ahead. This wasn't a show. This wasn't about proving something to anyone else. It was about precision, patience, and quiet determination. The champion took a few steps closer, studying him. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. The man's eyes met the target briefly, then back to his daughter. "A long time ago," he said simply. The champion raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. He had faced many shooters in his time, seen countless competitors try and fail. He had never encountered someone so calm, so precise, so controlled in their movements and focus. It was unusual, almost unsettling in its perfection. The girl whispered again, leaning closer to her father. What's next? He smiled faintly, just enough for her to see. We wait, and we do it again. The spectators shifted, unsure what to do. Some applauded quietly, others stayed silent, still processing what they had just witnessed. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. The champion, who had been the center of attention moments before, now watched quietly, clearly reassessing his own skill in the light of this unexpected talent. A few staff members approached cautiously. "Sir," one began, "that was impressive. Really impressive." He nodded politely, not boastful, not proud. "Thank you." The man knew that the recognition, while unexpected, wasn't necessary. His goal had never been about accolades. It had been about showing his daughter a lesson in focus, discipline, and quiet strength. And in that moment, he had done exactly that. The champion cleared his throat, speaking to the crowd now. "We've seen something rare today," he said. "Not just skill, but calm, control, and experience. Whoever this man is, he's remarkable." The man kept his focus, adjusting his stance slightly. The equipment was ready. He inhaled slowly, exhaling with the kind of control that only came from years of practice and discipline. The girl's small hands gripped his gently, supporting him, sharing the quiet strength that connected them. Around them, the room began to buzz with excitement again, though this time it was tinged with respect. The whispers became conversations, and people began to speculate on who this man was, where he had learned such skill, and how someone so unassuming could achieve something extraordinary. The champion finally stepped back, giving the lane a small nod of acknowledgement. "I want to see the next shot," he said quietly. "If you'll allow it." The man inclined his head slightly. "Of course," he replied softly. He breathed in again, letting the rhythm of calm guide him. The room, once loud and chaotic, seemed to fade into background noise. Every eye that watched could see the focus, the quiet determination, and the careful preparation. The girl's eyes sparkled with pride and amazement. She had never seen him like this, and she understood that this moment was about more than the numbers on a board. It was about control, patience, and demonstrating that quiet strength could make a difference. He adjusted the equipment slightly, checking it once more. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and precise. He didn't rush. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. He had learned long ago that precision mattered more than speed. "Ready?" he whispered softly to his daughter. "Ready," she whispered back, her small voice full of admiration. He took one final breath, steadying himself. The next shot was about to happen, and the room held its breath in anticipation. Everyone who had doubted him, ignored him, or assumed he was just another ordinary man, now waited to see what he would do next. And he was ready, calm, and in control, just as he had always been, proving in that moment that skill and patience were far more powerful than appearances or assumptions. The second shot echoed through the range, sharp and clean, yet softer than expected, as if it carried a quiet authority. The moment it left the barrel, the room went silent again. Everyone's eyes followed the path, hearts quickening with anticipation. When the bullet struck the target, the digital board confirmed it, another flawless hit. Murmurs erupted, this time louder, filled with awe and disbelief. People stepped back, unable to look away, realizing that the first shot had not been a fluke. The quiet man, standing calm and composed, had proven his skill beyond question. The champion's jaw tightened slightly. He walked closer, studying the man more carefully now. "You've got control I haven't seen in years," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Where did you learn to shoot like this?" The man glanced briefly at the champion, then down at his daughter. "A long time ago," he said simply, repeating the same words he had said earlier. There was no boastfulness, no pride. just a calm acknowledgement of what had been learned over years of experience. Spectators whispered to one another, some moving closer, some still hesitant, trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. Questions hung in the air. Was he military? Had he trained somewhere no one knew about? How could someone so unassuming, so ordinary in appearance, have such skill? Yet there was no trace of arrogance or showmanship in his demeanor. He wasn't performing for them. He was merely present, focused, and calm. The girl's small hands gripped the edge of the bench. Her eyes were wide, sparkling with pride and amazement. She had watched her father calmly prepare and take his shots, and now she saw the effect it had on everyone around him. Her heart swelled with admiration. She had always known he was capable, but witnessing it with her own eyes made it something she would never forget. A few staff members approached cautiously, whispering to each other. "Did you see that shot? And the first one before it. Unbelievable." The man nodded politely at them. "Thank you," he said softly, his tone calm, not seeking attention. He carefully adjusted the equipment, preparing for the next round. His movements were deliberate and controlled, each one reflecting years of training and discipline. The champion, still studying him, took a step back. "I've faced many skilled shooters," he admitted, "but few with that level of focus. Calm under pressure, precise, steady. You've got something rare." The man's eyes shifted briefly to his daughter, giving her a small, reassuring smile. "It's not about proving anything," he said quietly. "It's about doing what you've learned, keeping steady and staying patient." The spectators began to understand that this was more than just a competition. This was a demonstration of quiet strength, patience, and skill. They whispered among themselves, some in awe, others in disbelief, but all attentive. The room had shifted. The air was heavier now, with respect, curiosity, and a touch of humility. The man's calm presence commanded it, even without saying much. The champion nodded slowly, taking another step back. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to watch the next shot closely," he said, voice low but genuine. The man inclined his head slightly. "Of course," he replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. There was no challenge in his eyes, no arrogance. Just focus. The girl leaned forward, watching her father intently. "Daddy, they're all looking at you now," she whispered. He looked down at her, softening his expression. "That's okay. You saw it first. That's what matters." The crowd had grown slightly, people drawn by curiosity, by the story unfolding before them. Some held their phones, recording, while others simply stood in silence, watching. No one moved too close. Everyone instinctively gave space, unsure if they should speak or remain quiet. The room felt alive, yet respectful. He adjusted the equipment, checked his stance, and inhaled deeply, feeling the calm settle into every muscle. He exhaled slowly, letting go of any tension, allowing his focus to sharpen. His daughter mirrored him, small hands steady, eyes fixed on him, learning not just how to shoot, but how to be patient, disciplined, and quietly strong. A few seasoned shooters whispered among themselves. "That's not luck," one said. "That's skill, pure and simple." "Could be military," another added. "Years of experience, probably. Look at his stance, his control. You don't get that by practicing for weekends." The man didn't react. He had learned long ago that speculation was meaningless. What mattered was the task at hand, the present moment, and the promise he had made to his daughter. The champion took a few steps closer, now speaking directly to the crowd. "We are witnessing something extraordinary," he said. "This is not just a talent. It's discipline, experience, and focus. Whoever this man is, he's showing us a level of control few can achieve." The spectators murmured again, impressed and intrigued. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Some people whispered about who he might be, where he had trained, and how he had kept this skill hidden until now. The room buzzed with quiet excitement, tempered by respect that the man prepared for his next shot. His hands moved with precision, checking the equipment carefully. His daughter mirrored him silently, her small body tense with anticipation. She had learned patience from him before, but seeing it in this moment, applied so perfectly, made the lesson powerful and unforgettable. "Ready?" he whispered to her. "Ready," she replied, voice small but filled with conviction. He inhaled, steadying himself. The room seemed to quiet even more, as if holding its breath. Every eye was on him, yet he remained calm, grounded, and composed. This was not about the crowd, the champion, or the records on the board. It was about precision, focus, and quiet determination. It was about showing his daughter the importance of patience, skill, and control. The shot rang out, precise and controlled, echoing through the range. When the bullet struck the target, the digital board confirmed it, another perfect hit. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd. The champion stepped back, clearly impressed, and the staff members looked on in awe. The man lowered his equipment slowly, composed and calm, acknowledging nothing, celebrating nothing, and yet proving everything. The girl's eyes shone with pride. She looked up at her father, a mixture of awe and admiration on her small face. She had witnessed something remarkable, a quiet strength that spoke louder than any words could. Around them, the spectators murmured, some in disbelief, others with respect, and a few whispered guesses about his past and training. The champion finally nodded, speaking quietly to the man. "You've got skill, patience, and control that I've rarely seen. I want to learn from you someday." The man nodded slightly, acknowledging the compliment without ego. "I only do what I know." Focus, patience, and care go further than strength or showmanship. The crowd around them began to applaud quietly, not loudly, but with genuine respect. The man had changed their perception without trying. His calmness, precision, and focus spoke louder than words or accolades. He glanced down at his daughter, giving her a small, reassuring smile. She understood perfectly. The lesson had been taught, silently but powerfully. It was about skill, discipline, and quiet determination. Recognition or applause was not necessary. What mattered was the lesson, the demonstration, and the example he had set for her. The spectators continued to watch in awe. The champion remained thoughtful, and the staff members exchanged looks of disbelief and admiration. The man, calm and composed, prepared for the next part of his demonstration, his daughter standing proudly by his side, ready to witness and learn from each moment. This was more than a record-breaking display. It was a quiet lesson in focus, discipline, and the kind of strength that didn't need to be loud to be extraordinary. The room was still buzzing with quiet excitement when the man took his final stance. The digital board glowed faintly in the background, displaying the scores of his previous shots. Every eye in the range was on him, some filled with awe, some with disbelief, and a few with curiosity. Even the champion watched silently, clearly. Impressed, perhaps reassessing everything he thought he knew about skill and focus. The man adjusted his equipment one last time. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and calm. His daughter stood beside him, small hands gripping his gently, absorbing every detail. She had learned so much in the past few hours about patience, about focus, and about the quiet strength her father carried within him. She could see it not just in his hands or his stance, but in the way he carried himself, steady, confident, yet humble. "Ready?" he whispered softly to her. "Ready," she replied, voice small but firm. He took a deep breath, allowing the calm to settle into every muscle. The room seemed to hold its breath along with him. Even the clatter and chatter that had surrounded them faded into the background. This was a quiet moment, one of focus and presence. The man had learned long ago that the right moment required patience, and that skill alone was meaningless without control. He lifted the equipment slowly, carefully, positioning it perfectly. The spectators watched, leaning forward, barely daring to breathe. The champion's eyes narrowed slightly, studying every subtle motion, every adjustment. This was not just about hitting a target. It was about mastery, experience, and focus, the kind that comes from years of dedication. The man exhaled slowly, letting his body align with his mind. He had trained for moments like this, not for applause, not for recognition, but for the satisfaction of doing something with precision and care. His daughter's eyes were fixed on him, wide with admiration, and that gave him a quiet sense of accomplishment that no record could measure. Then, with complete control, he took the shot. The sound rang out, sharp but not harsh. The bullet struck the target perfectly, hitting the center cleanly. The digital board updated instantly, flashing the new score. It was the highest score ever recorded at the range. Gasps spread through the room. The staff exchanged shocked glances. Even the champion's expression softened, a mix of respect and amazement on his face. The man lowered his equipment carefully, as calm as ever. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile broadly. He simply turned to his daughter and gave her a small, reassuring nod. She understood completely. She clutched his hand and whispered, "You did it, Daddy." He knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "Yes," he said quietly, "but that's not what matters. What matters is focus, patience, and staying calm, no matter what anyone else thinks." The champion approached him slowly, extending a hand. "I've competed against the best," he said quietly, "but I've never seen control like that. I want to learn from you." The man shook his hand firmly, but with a quiet humility. "I don't teach for recognition," he said. "I teach for understanding. Focus, patience, and control are lessons anyone can learn, but they come from experience, not showmanship." The spectators began to clap softly, respect in their gestures. Some recorded the moment on their phones. Others simply watched, impressed by the quiet authority of the man who had just broken the record. Conversations began to rise again, but this time filled with admiration rather than doubt. The girl's face glowed with pride. She had seen her father accomplish something extraordinary, yet he remained humble, focused, and calm. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever, not just about shooting, but about life, patience, and quiet strength. A staff member approached and said, "Sir, we'd like to offer you lifetime access to the range." The man nodded politely. "I appreciate it, but we won't need it," he said. "We came for one lesson. That's enough." People whispered among themselves, amazed that someone could accomplish so much without seeking attention or reward. The champion nodded again, clearly reflecting on the humility and skill he had just witnessed. He had been used to competition, to attention, to the spotlight, but he realized that true mastery often came without fanfare. The man packed up his equipment carefully, checking it, securing it, and closing the case with practiced ease. He held his daughter's hand, and together they walked toward the exit. The crowd followed with quiet respect, some offering nods or soft applause. The champion remained at the lane, watching them leave, thinking about what he had seen and what it meant for his own understanding of skill and focus. Outside, the air felt fresh, calm, and ordinary again. The parking lot was quiet, the sun shining gently on the pavement. The girl looked up at her father. "Daddy, will we come back?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe someday," he said. "But today, you've seen the lesson." "That's what matters," she nodded, understanding completely. She had learned that day that skill without humility, focus without patience, and strength without calm were meaningless. She had watched her father demonstrate all of them perfectly, quietly, and without need for recognition. As they got into the car, a few people followed them with their eyes, still murmuring about the remarkable display they had witnessed. The champion watched from the lane, reflecting on what had just happened, and on the realization that sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones who quietly carry their experience, skill, and wisdom without seeking notice. The man started the engine, the hum quiet and steady, and drove away slowly. His daughter sat quietly, small hands folded in her lap, still thinking about what she had seen. She didn't need words to understand the lesson. The experience had spoken louder than any conversation could. The record on the board would remain impressive and undeniable, but the real lesson was deeper, more lasting. As they drove away, the man glanced at his daughter, eyes softening. "Remember this moment," he said gently. "Not for the score, not for the attention, but for what it teaches you. Quiet strength, patience, focus, they matter more than anything else." She nodded, absorbing the words, storing them in her memory. She knew that she had witnessed something rare, a moment that would shape her understanding of discipline, skill, and humility for years to come. Behind them, the shooting range returned to its usual rhythm. People continued to practice, scores were logged, but a quiet respect lingered in the air. The staff, the champion, and the spectators had all learned a valuable lesson that day. Greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly, unnoticed, until the right moment arrives to reveal its full power. The man and his daughter drove on, leaving behind the echoes of shots, whispers of admiration, and a story that would be remembered, not for the applause it received, but for the lesson it taught. It was a victory of a different kind, a quiet, unassuming, and deeply human kind of triumph that no one could take away, and one that would stay with his daughter forever.